Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you are returning from a previous Real Talk, welcome again to our safe space. If you are new to, if this is your first webinar, welcome. We're glad that you're here. My name is Eva Reyes, and I am the Director of Parent and Family Relations. Just so that you know, the session is being recorded right now. And it's going to be recorded for a portion of the session. And then once we get into a more like personal in-depth conversation, then we're going to stop the recording at that time, but I'll let you know when that happens. So because we did start a little bit late, I want to make sure that that we get into our conversation right away. But first, I want to set some ground rules. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to unmute or put the question in the chat or the Q&A. Both Daisy, who she will introduce herself in a little bit, and I both speak Spanish, so and are fluent. So if you have any questions in Spanish, you could put them in the chat, and I will try my best to be able to answer those questions as Daisy is presenting. We know that it's already in like early evening, right? So some of you may be having dinner or maybe doing other things while you're in the webinar. Feel free to continue to do those things as you listen in. But if you have any questions, just please let us know. So with further ado, this is Daisy Rodriguez, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you for spending your evening with me. I'm Daisy Rodriguez. Hello, Debbie. Thank you for logging on with your camera. It's always nice to see faces. Sometimes Zoom can be a lonely place. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and I work at William Patterson University. I'm the Associate Director for Counseling, Health, and Wellness. I've been with the university for over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of students come, join the university, face and overcome amazing adversity and struggle and graduate. So, one of the things that first and foremost that I want all of you to know is that by and large, our students are incredibly resilient. Your children are incredibly resilient. And many of the stressors that they are coping with now and will need to face during their time with us at William Patterson University, they're going to successfully negotiate and they're going to graduate. But my intention here tonight in meeting with all of you is to create a safe space. I want to create a space here where all of you can bring your questions and concerns, right? I mean, you are all tuning in, I am sure, because you care about this topic and you care about your children. And so this is an opportunity for all of us as parents, right? The kids are not here with us. It's just us to really have some honest and open conversation about mental health, to talk about, some of the sort of typical things that students face when they're in college, and some practical skills that you can use as a parent, right, to sort of balance that role as parent, partner, and advocate when it's appropriate. But more than anything else, I'm here to answer any questions you might have. So the series is called Real Talk. It's not called Real Presentations. So I don't want to sit here and give you like a real formal presentation. A lot of what you will take away from our talk will depend on, I think, the courage and the risk that you take in coming forward and asking some of your questions and concerns. So, one of the things I'd like to do to open up is, if the group would be so kind as to put in the chat, if all of you know how to use a Zoom chat, please put in there, just confirm if you have a child at William Patterson University, let me know what year they're in now. So I want to get a sense of the parents that are in the space, whether you are parenting first year, second year, third year students, or seniors. Thank you. All right, so we have a first year parent. And please put in the chat. So this helps me tailor some of the information that I'm going to share with all of you. Okay, Sharon has a first year as well. Okay, first year. All right. And Debbie has a son at Willie. Oh, another first-year student. All right. So see what we're seeing here? We're seeing a lot of parents of first-year students. This is wonderful. Okay. Does anybody else want to contribute? It looks like we have overwhelmingly first-year students. First-year students. All right. Good job, parents. I'm so proud of you. Starting early, getting all the information that you need, learning about these resources. These are going to make you better and stronger partners for your children as they move through their years of their education. Okay, fabulous. And so I have one more chat sort of question that I really need your help with. There is a reason that each of you came to this topic. I know there's a curiosity and interest. Is there a question? By the end of our hour today together, is there a question that you would love to have answered? And if there is, put it in the chat, because that's also going to help me. Think about a question you would want to have answered.
Well, everyone, thanks. I guess that will start it off. Maybe you'll give people ideas, right? Mm-hmm. If I see, that my son or daughter is not acting the way that they usually act, right? What are the things that I should be noticing as a parent to make sure that my child is in the right state of mind and is being successful while going to college?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Eva, I want to just repeat what I heard back to you to make sure I heard the question correctly. Mm-hmm. So you're asking me, what do you do as a parent if you notice a change in your child's behavior? Is that what you're saying? A change in your child's behavior that concerns you. What should you do? And the second part of that question was, what resources or what is it that we can do as a university to support you and the child?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very important. This is a very important question, because for every question one person in this group asks, I promise you there's another parent curious about the same thing. So I'm going to, there's someone put a question in the chat as well. There's a parent who says, my son has recently sought out assistance. If he agrees, will you engage me? He has been open about wanting support. All right. So this second question, and thank you for that. iPhone 64. Thank you for that question, because that question relates to privacy and confidentiality. So we're going to talk about that. And so what I'll do, I'll bring up our department webpage. I'll talk to you about our center and how we work. And we'll talk about HIPAA and privacy so that you all have an understanding of, how we can, whether your student is open or not, about whether they use our services, that we're still available to support you as parents. All right. And then there's just one, it looks like there's one more question here. My son feels depressed and lonely in the residence halls on weekends. Okay. He said most kids have cars and drive home. He doesn't, and we want him to stay on campus. We asked him to join a fraternity or get a job. So this parent is concerned about her son's engagement, belonging, the son, she's looking for, like, where is there community for her son? Because of course, we know that if students find sort of connections and meaningful and purposeful activities, there is a protective effect against depression and anxiety. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. All right, and there was a follow-up comment from iPhone 64 that she reached out to us. Okay, so why don't we start with Eva's question, and let's start there, and then we'll work from the more general to more about our department and then how our department works. So I think one of the first things we all have to talk about is, what's normal and what's not normal. Think about, for a moment, I want you all as parents to remember that you have spent the better part of your child's life preparing them for college, that as a parent, as a family, you have role models for them. They've grown up with you. You have role modeled for them what your values are, what your expectations are, what's important, what's not important. When a child leaves you to come to college, they bring all of that with them, right? One of the most important first tasks for you as a parent with your child when they get ready to go to college is to have a sit down. There's going to be a guide that Eva is going to share with all of you. And it's a guide that is created by the Jed Foundation, and it's developed just for parents. And it covers these subjects in such a meaningful and personal and practical way. So I'll be referring to some of these things generally because we only have an hour, but please reference that guide, take it, read it, digest it, talk with your child about it, because it gives you a great map for having an informed conversation with your child about what your expectations are for them when they come to college, when they're in college, how, as a parent, you would hope that they negotiate, not just the practical stuff like finances, like whether they're going to work or not, what their study habits are going to be. It's really important as a family to sit with your son and daughter and talk to them about the hard stuff too. We have to ask our kids, how do they feel? How do they feel about being in college? How do they feel about their professors? What kind of experiences are they having socially? Even if your child is not giving much, it's important to role model for your children that you want to have conversations about their emotional life, because that is going to prepare them for the kind of relationship you want to have with them as an adult. So this is a critical time for 18, 19-year-olds, because we renegotiate as parents, and I'm a parent too, we renegotiate our boundaries with our kids. We're not going to be with them 24/7 now. Now we have to rely on the foundation that we've given them as parents, right? Everything that we've taught them until the time that they left you. They need to rely on that knowledge. They need to rely on that training. And so they're going to come to college and they're going to be tested. They're going to be tested. The stress that occurs during college, and oftentimes we think about stress as a negative thing, but stress is necessary in order to grow. Our children will be faced with all kinds of things that we have prepared them for and not prepared them for. But what is a foundation to all of this is our values and how we prepare them with contingency plans, right? We got to talk to our children about substance use. We have to talk to them about what our expectations are. We have to have honest conversations with them for what might happen. Let's say if your child finds themselves in a situation where they drink too much, or someone offers them substances that they don't want, talk to your child about a plan. Like I have parents talk to their kids, say, hey, if you're in a situation that you're not comfortable, text me this code. And here is the plan. So that child is on campus and that child knows if they're isolated, if they don't know where to go, if it's after hours, that they have an ancillary sense of support that's going to provide them with that security, that's going to allow them and create a space for them to feel safe and make choices. And it's also going to allow them to trust you. It's going to, how I titled this parent, partner, and advocate. We sort of shift from rushing in to fix the problem to almost being an ally and being a partner, and understanding that these challenging times are going to happen. So conversations around consent, sexual consent, are also important. But let's talk about mental health. We do not, and I'm talking about our generation. I didn't have that conversation with my parents when I went to college. My mom did not talk to me about what would happen if I, give up and I get depressed and I get anxious. We didn't have the emotional literacy back then to talk about our mental health, but we know better now. We know that it's important. So if you haven't had the opportunity to talk to your child, open up those pathways, check in with them, let them know, because this is a fact, right? 75% of children who develop diagnosable mental health conditions tend to show first symptoms between age 18 and 21. This is the primal period for children to begin to show signs. And so as an informed parent, you want to give them that education and say, honey, this is a time that there's lots of risk factors for young people. And I want you to know that you can talk to me, that I understand the word depression. If you want to label it depression, if you want to use words like anxiety, if you want to use words like I am here for you, and we can have these kinds of conversations. And if they don't want to have the conversation with you, maybe there's a friend, there's an uncle, there's a cousin, there's a family friend. But let them identify a source of people and community that they can go to. What I've learned about our students, this is 20 years of practice. Our students, even though we have a formal counseling center on campus, right? Our students most often will go to their peers. So when they're in trouble, when they're challenged, when they're struggling with their emotions, they want to go to where they feel most comfortable. And that's sometimes why they get in trouble, because they go to their peers and their peers are going through the similar concerns and problems. And so next to their peers, they go to family. And when we poll our students here at William Patterson, they list their peers first and then family. They don't immediately come to the counseling center. So, I know, coming back to Eva's concern, if Eva is a parent and she sees a change in her child's functioning that's concerning her, I would say, Eva, you need to have that conversation with your son or daughter in a direct way. Use phrases that label the behavior specifically. So sometimes as parents, we don't want to shame or call out our children. But I've learned, as a family therapist, I've been a family therapist for 30 years. Sometimes the best way is to be direct. You got to call it for what it is. Because if you're not afraid to go there, it opens the door for your child to be able to name it too.
Daisy, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
What would be an example of like that engagement?
Okay. So a scenario is my son, right? My first year son has had a good 3-4 weeks of college. As far as I can tell, going to classes, eating, sleeping, seems to be making friends. And then there's like a change. I'm not hearing from him as much via text. Not washing the clothes. Maybe when I see something looks off about the hygiene, there's something different. And so what I might do is say, honey, I noticed the last few times that I've seen you, something is different. Is there anything going on that I should know about? Our kids by nature, they want to protect us. They want to protect us from discomfort. They don't ever want to disappoint us. This is also very normal human behavior. But as a parent, you can also call that out and say, listen, I want you to know that there is nothing. There is nothing, no decision, no choice, no situation that you could ever be involved in that you cannot come to me for help with. There will be no other ally greater than me because we've been together. We've had a relationship for as long as we have. And if they don't open up, I want you to think about it. If there's something, I don't know, but my intuition tells me something is off. And if you don't feel okay opening up to me, and I respect that. And then remember, if you have your list of people that you've talked about with your son, there might be, call Uncle Joe, or if you don't feel comfortable, we could contact the counseling center on campus, which, oftentimes makes the students nervous if they haven't been in counseling before. But we're a partner too. So allow your son to think about what you've said, to review the choices that you've offered, and then, allow space, but come back to it. Come back to it, Eva. We need as parents to, if they deny and say, oh, well, okay, I guess he's fine. He's saying he doesn't need help. But often as parents, if we see a change, a decline in functioning that doesn't, but children are like, especially in college, they're like rubber bands. So you're going to see them under a lot of stress. And sometimes you'll see your kid stops eating, stops bathing because they're under a lot of stress. But you're supposed to see that rubber band snap back. That's what's normal, because what they're doing is under the weight of that stress, they're building resiliency. They're building new skills. So it's very normal to see your child go through these sort of waves of stress, but then coming back to center, coming back to the routine. But if you see that your child, we're talking about 4 weeks plus, isn't coming back to their normal routine, something isn't right. If you find that your child is still not engaging, and your child isn't interested in talking to a family member or going to the counseling center, parents call our center every single day. Every single day. We get parents calling us and saying, I'm concerned about my child, and here are the reasons why. So depending on the issue, we'll partner with you. We'll partner with you and say, okay, have you tried X, Y, and Z? Maybe we'll come up with some strategies together to continue a conversation or bring in another support. But sometimes, depending on what the student is presenting with, if the student is presenting with like substance use or behavior that's like potentially putting themselves at risk or someone else at risk, we have to act in a more intentional way. And so then our therapists then will reach out to the student and invite them to come in. So what we want to do in that scenario, Eva, you as a parent are recognizing something's going on with your child. We need to increase that circle of support around your child. We need to increase the amount of eyes and supports and links so that the more people that are involved in consulting about your child, the more likely someone will break through, someone will engage and then someone can have that conversation and we can then create some kind of intervention. Does that make sense, Eva?
It does. It does. And I did have a follow-up question, but
yes.
But you did talk it through, like what happens when the child just doesn't want to engage, right? Yes. They say everything is fine, but obviously there's something wrong, like your child better than anyone else, right? So I appreciate that you were able to kind of like provide that example for us.
Yes, remember that. Remember, it's like, am I the parent? Do I need to, something that we need to refrain from when our kids are younger, we need to be more direct and we need to be more structured and we need to take more control because they're younger and they don't have the ability to problem solve. But when they're in college, we really have to try, to be aware of whether we need to parent, meaning like be direct and tell them what to do, or we need to partner and say, okay, this problem is bigger than me because my child is not opening up to me. So I need more partners. I need more resources at the university to help me get through to my child. Sometimes when that doesn't happen, because sometimes even you bring more supports in and the student is still not doing what they need to do, then you move into the role of advocate. And I have parents too that are advocating because we're putting supports in place for the child, but there's still no growth. There's still no change. And that also happens. And so then that's sort of like, when you get to that third level, that's when we're sitting down and we're sort of planning maybe more intensive interventions at that point. But most of the issues that parents bring forth have to do with what you're referring to, Eva. And, and Debbie had a very good scenario that she posted as well, where she mentioned that she has a son who's going through some depression, anxiety, and on the weekends is feeling isolated. And so, people who live with depression and anxiety often can feel disengaged. That's part of that experience. And so, if I sat with Debbie one-on-one, we'd have to think together, okay, where are the opportunities here? Because now Debbie has to move into that partner role and say, let me learn about the resources on campus. Let me see where there's potential pathways to increase some socialization opportunities for my child. And how can we maybe get an RA? Like, if they're living in the residence hall, how can we get maybe an RA to do an outreach to the student, maybe invite them to participate on some of the activities that go on the weekend? Can we get a peer mentor? Because we have several peer mentor programs. That maybe a peer mentor can reach out to the student and invite, him to come out and do something on the weekends. So sometimes, when the student may not either know where the resources are or may not be motivated to do it on their own, the intervention has to kind of come from the university to the student. We've got to come in a different way, partnering, of course, with the parent and other resources on campus.
So I just wanted to add,
Yes.
so we have seen this already been happening like throughout the semester, right? So I have had parents reach out to me, and one of the first things that I do is it's connect with the dean of students, just to make sure that she's aware of the situation, or maybe she may already know, right? And then when we come together, we're like, oh yeah, I already heard about the student. Or if it's something new, then we sit together and we strategize, like, what are we going to do? So she'll go out and reach out to Residence Life. I'll go out and I'll reach out to the academic advisor / willpower instructor. And then that's how we're connecting with the student. We're not letting them know that you were the one that reached out to us. But we're making, like, we're trying to connect and do that outreach, because obviously something is wrong. And if you're noticing, if you're already telling us, most likely that other person is noticing as well. And now they just have like a more of an to say, listen, let's sit down, let's see what's going on, and let me gear you towards the right resources.
Thank you, Eva. See, and you hear in Eva's discussion there, you hear how it's like we identify the issue, we bring resources to the table, we bring supports to the table, and we engage the student. Because we know, what do we know? That students who have a sense of belonging and engagement, that's a protective factor against anxiety, against depression, against like dropout. The more a student feels engaged and a sense of purpose, the more likely that they're going to show up to classes and do better academically. These interventions that Eva is sharing, they're fundamental to what we do. But if you heard her well, oftentimes it's the parent. It's not the student always who comes forward and say, I need the help. Sometimes it's the parent that's calling in because they can see things even before sometimes that the student is ready to talk about them.
So for the question in the chat, I think this is Janice, and I have spoken to Janice before. So what happens is that we have to make sure that the student has some sort of privacy. So her question is, when that initial outreach occurs, is there a follow-up plan, regular checks in, etc.? So what I have a log of every contact that you have made with me, right? So in that log, when I pass off the information to the dean of students and to the either the career coach or the academic advisor, I do ask for a follow-up after that. And then at that point, we leave it to the student to make sure that they're doing the outreach. But if you're still noticing that nothing is changing, like Daisy said, then you have to make sure that now we come into this other role, right? Where then there needs to be a more intentional outreach in order for us to get the student to do what we need them to do. Can you then follow up with me and ask, what has been a resolution and things like that? Yes. But again, I have to protect the students' privacy within FERPA and within HIPAA, right? So there's a lot of little intricacies because of the privacy issue. But rest assured, these are things that we're always following up on the back end, even if I'm not communicating with you.
And so as it comes to privacy in terms of counseling specifically, if you refer your child to counseling or your child comes to counseling on their own, our center is a HIPAA certified entity. So we're no different than any other doctor's office. Your child's health records, our center is an integrated health and mental health center, are protected by federal HIPAA laws. We keep any records and information on a separate server. So none of that is connected to the university's records. The university has no information regarding any student's health or wellness. Sometimes students will give a signed consent, just like when you go to your doctor's office, they'll give a HIPAA release. So if I'm working with a student that is also working with Eva, and the student would like for me to confirm to Eva that they came in for counseling, they would sign a release, and then that gives me permission to then share that information with Eva. It would be the same for each of you as parents. Our center believes very strongly in the involvement of parents in the child's care, especially when the family is considered a source of support for the student. And so we always encourage, when there is a significant issue going on, a significant diagnosable condition, we will say to the student, are these decisions that you would want your mom or dad involved in? And if they sign a HIPAA release, then we can openly discuss your student's care. But even if they don't have a release, even if they don't, you can always call, and this happens often. I have a parent will call me and say, listen, I know my child hasn't signed a release, but I'm Sammy's mom, and I know Sammy talks to you. So I want to let you know that this is what happened at home this weekend. We can get that information. Even if I can't give you what Sammy's sharing with me, as a parent, you can always call me and give me the information, and I will follow up. I will follow up with that student. So HIPAA applies to us. We do not. FERPA is more sort of outside of counseling, health, and wellness. But if you have any further questions about HIPAA, you can always feel free to reach out to me or put any further questions about HIPAA in the chat. In terms of risk, so please do know that if we have a child that is presenting with a specific threat to themselves or others, and what that means is, it doesn't mean that we're sitting with a student who has some sort of passive wish to die. We're talking about when a student specifically says, I have an intention and a plan to take my life or take the life of someone else, then there is a state law under Tarasoff that we have to notify an emergency, either the emergency contact, or in the absence of that, we have to notify a person who is safe to then make sure that that student is safe. So, and in those circumstances, HIPAA does not apply. So, and I want to be clear with parents, because sometimes parents worry and they say, if there's an emergency, I won't be contacted. But if there is a true emergency, you will. It's very likely that you will be contacted. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So I don't see any other questions in the chat specifically related to scenarios for your children. So I want to go back to sort of what's normal and what's abnormal. So in that role, it's a very important awareness that you need to have for what is typical and untypical for your child. Remember, I was saying earlier, during the years of college, you've seen it already because we're in November. So statistically, the highest number of students that don't make it past their first semester of college do so in the first 6 weeks. If your children have gotten this far, it's very likely that they are assuming some skills, that they're adjusting, that they're doing well. But you know what is typical for your child, and you know what is untypical. Be aware of anything that suggests that your child is not coming back to their typical norm past 4 weeks of whatever stressor it is that they're dealing with. Midterms, finals, breakups with relationships, conflicts with roommates. If they're not adjusting past that time period and you see changes in sleep, hygiene, socialization with others, potential substance use, potential self-injury. This is also something that some students engage in to help them cope with their feelings. If you observe that your child's clock, it's very different, that your child's sleeping all day, maybe not sleeping at night, changes in diet, things that just are different and don't seem to get better, that's a flag. And so you can talk to your child, reach out to our center, reach out to Eva, because Eva, something that you've already heard, we collaborate cross departments freely, openly, all the time. We understand that in order to support our students, we need to do so in layers. We need to do so in groups, and we need to bring our services together. So it doesn't matter where you start the conversation about your concern for your child, as long as you start it. So if it starts with a professor, if it starts with Eva, if it starts with wherever it is that you feel like you have a communication or a contact, please trust that that conversation is going to matter, and that there's going to be follow-up, and we're going to continue to talk with you and monitor your child, and we're going to collaborate to give your child the support that they need in order for them to remain successful. If you are concerned that your child is abusing substances or maybe a risk to themselves or other people, please know that our center has a 24-hour access. It has a 24-hour access line where we have a counselor on call. So you can speak to a counselor 24 hours a day to talk about anything that's affecting your child's mental health. It is, again, right, a confidential conversation. I'm going to pull up our webpage. Hopefully this works so you can see how you can best reach us. So if you go to your phone's browser, you go to the university webpage and you type in the word wellness, WELLNESS. It's going to automatically take you to our center's departmental webpage. And the phone number, the 24-hour crisis line, is the first number that you see right here in red, 973-720-2257. So 7 days a week, 365 days a year, a counselor is available to consult with you about any concern that you're having. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a crisis, because I know for some of us that work, we may not have quiet time until like later in the evening. But feel free, and then that counselor will, give you some guidance, resources, and then if it's after hours, that counselor will generate a report for me to then receive the following morning when I come in. And then I'll have one of my counselors or me reach out to you to follow up the following morning. Okay. Now, if you go to this page when you have time, and, because this is, again, right, in your role as partner and advocate, you want to really get yourself as knowledgeable as you can about the resources that are available on campus. Because sometimes, our children may not know about the resources, but if we know, we can get the resources talking to each other. So, we do have free mental health and free medical care on campus. There is no charge for any service in our department. So, our students often don't take advantage of the service that's available to them. And, they often feel more comfortable with their therapists or their pediatricians at home, which we understand. But sometimes, right, you may not be able to get to campus to come and pick them up and take them to the doctor's office. Know that they can always, and every day, we have walk-in hours for medical visits and mental health visits free of charge. Students can come in every day between 8:30 and 4:30. Well, closer to 4:15, because that 4:30 is close to when we close, and sit and talk with a licensed medical or mental health provider about any concern that's affecting them. And again, all our services are private and confidential under HIPAA. So feel free to go into our university, our departmental webpage, and familiarize yourself with our services so that you can be good allies for your children. I also want to make you aware, another important resource that actually has just begun for all college students in the state of New Jersey. I'm just going to click on this page. Can everybody see that? You will? So New Jersey, the state of New Jersey has entered into a partnership with a national telemental health provider called YouWill. And, thanks to COVID recovery money, the state of New Jersey is paying for 3 years of free therapy for any enrolled college student in New Jersey. So it is outstanding, wonderful, especially for those of you that are parents and are paying for therapy. Know that there is a free resource. So if your child is not interested in coming to counseling, or for whatever reason, right, maybe they're remote, or they're only available after hours because they're working, please know and take note of this service that has partnered with the state of New Jersey. It's called YouWill. You go to the QR code, and all the student needs to do is to log in using their university email. So, right, so the same university email that they use at William Patterson, they log into the YouWill page, they create a portal for themselves using their own password, and it with YouWill, they can choose a therapist by specialty, by gender, by a preferred race. They also have therapists in the evening and the weekend hours. And what's wonderful about this service as well is that they can keep that same therapist. If they feel comfortable, they can keep that therapist all year round. Where, students that come to our center on campus, there are times of the year that we do close when the university closes, but YouWill is open year round. So that is also a great and important resource that you should definitely talk to your students about. I'm just going to stop sharing this page. Okay. And so if you have any further questions about, our medical care or mental health care, or getting your child connected to services on campus, you can, put it in the chat, or I'll also stay on the call for a few minutes past our 7:00 time. So if you want to consult a little more about your specific situation, I can do that. Does anybody have any other questions about our department? Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do, again, as I had mentioned in the beginning. Okay. All right. So there's just one question that just came in. Let me take a moment and read that. Okay. How do you refer your child to counseling and speak to them about a possible root cause? Okay. So it is, right? It really is all about the conversation. It really is about setting that tone and beginning to introduce that dialogue and managing our own expectations too as parents, because it's likely that if your child is not used to opening up to you, they may resist. And this is like part of the process, because, when you're trying to change a particular dynamic with your child and it's new, it is natural for the child to not want to cause discomfort or disappointment, and they might yes you or minimize and things like that. But as parents, we have to be, when we come in, we need to be sort of brief, and we have to be clear, and we have to be intentional about what we're seeing, what our concern is, and what we think might be of help. Let's remember too, because our kids are 18, I imagine most of the people in the room have children that are 18 or older. As a university, we cannot force counseling. We cannot force counseling on the college student if they ultimately refuse. And sometimes our students do refuse. But I don't want you to think that if a student, because they do have the right to refuse counseling, there are many ways in which we can address a student's need that don't involve formal counseling. So if a student refuses to come, Eva earlier was talking about our Dean of Students. Our Dean of Students is a huge ally. She is a licensed psychologist. And because she functions as a dean and not a therapist, it allows her to let's say if you're really concerned about your child and your child is showing signs of potentially a mental health issue and they won't get help, the dean has the ability to then ask the student to come and meet with her. And certainly with a little more muscle than we do, because we can't force our students, but the dean of students can mandate a meeting. And then in those spaces, have open and honest conversations with the student about what is being observed and what the recommendation may or may not be for that particular student. So I as a parent, yes, we're going to talk about counseling. Let's see how we can try to get your child to counseling and convince them that they need it. But ultimately, if they refuse, we cannot force them. But we do have other ways of working with students to address the sources of what's aggravating the depression or anxiety, right? So coming back to Debbie's point, if Debbie has a child that lives with depression and that child doesn't want counseling but still feels lonely, we can address that loneliness. And in the process of addressing the loneliness, we can talk to them about the depression. We can talk to them about how to increase that sense of like motivation and purpose. There's a lot of literature in college mental health right now that's dedicated to what we call upstream and prevention, because it's not always just the diagnosis and the label. It's about getting at the things, those risk factors and those protective factors that ultimately help our kids overcome whatever it is that they're dealing with. And the people that help are not always just the counselors. A lot of times it's their natural supports. It's their advisors. It's their professors. It's the people that the students have the most contact with and most trust in, that are people that they'll open up to, because those are the folks that are in their lives from day to day. And so, certainly at William Patterson, we work collaboratively to make sure that if the student isn't open or ready to have a conversation with me, there's someone in that space that's keeping regular eyes and ears out to make sure that the student is still moving and making strides towards success. I see there's let me just check the chat. There might be.
So there are more questions, but I just want to make sure that in the interest of time,
yes,
and so that we could get into more like maybe in-depth personal questions, right? Which I want to stop the recording. So so I'm going to stop the recording right now. So before I do that, I just wanted to thank you for being able to have this conversation with us. I do think it's very important for us to have like the right tools and resources in order to be able to best guide our children. As we know, mental health, it's a really big issue. A lot of people are struggling, but no one has to struggle by themselves. That's why you parents, you have us to be able to partner with you in order to be able to get your student the help that they need. So with that said, thank you so much, Daisy, and I am going to stop and then we'll continue.
Okay.